Hey, what's up, mortals? It is I, the Silent Sheepdog, here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 7 of What If Izuku was the host of the Blacklight virus. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying, sit back, relax, you are in for a treat. And so, we begin. After being informed of the future state of Japan according to Sir Night-Eye's vision, the two boys sat with rather distraught faces as they kept their heads down. Bakugo gripped the cloth of his pants in an attempt to contain his frustration. The feeling that the path that they were currently on could have been avoided if he would have just kept his friend from going on that trip that fateful day. Todoroki was at a loss for words. Not only was the virus going to continue to spread, but either he or the explosive youth beside him would be the ones destined to fight to a true end. Truly, a tense situation, to say the least. Now, the specific reason that we've brought you both here is so we can determine which of you will become my successor. The words from the symbol of peace caused the teens' ears to perk up, and when their vision adjusted, they saw that the once hulking figure of All Might was reduced to a man resembling a skeleton. Todoroki's eyes widened due to the surprise, but remained silent to listen on. But even with this show of respect, the ashen blonde had plans of his own.
Oi! What the hell's going on here? You ain't All Might!
Shouted Bakugo as he stood up in anger, balling his fists as his chair fell behind him. Aizawa's eyes began to glow red, instinctively attempting to erase the boy's quirk, but he was just as quickly stopped by the #1 hero. After several minutes of explaining the hero's condition, the two boys felt a strange sense of sorrow for their idol, but their hope had yet to falter. What followed were multiple weeks of intense training where both Bakugo and Todoroki were pushed to their limits to unlock the potential of their quirks and prepare their bodies for the gift of One for All. Due to the state of affairs and the ever-looming threat of Patient Zero, UA High had opted to cancel that year's sports festival in favor of fortifying their defenses and training their students. The news of the largest annual event for the school caused great ire from the student populace and some teachers, but the risk far outweighed any possible reward they could obtain. Class 1A especially had taken the news rather hard, as most of these students' only possible shot at being seen by the pros was at said festival. But sadly, they'd have to lean on future events to make their name known. The class of 20 students had been reorganized due to the explosive teen and the bichromatic youth being essentially removed from their class to focus on their uninhibited training. That separation caused the teens' friends to grow concerned, and along with this, a small twinge of jealousy began to sprout within them as the special treatment was apparent.
At this rate, we're all gonna be left behind!
Spoke the grape-haired boy, as his feet dangled from the sofa in the dorm lounge. Shortly after, a knuckle impacted behind the dwarven youth's head, sending him to the ground due to the shift in momentum.
That'll shut you up for a bit. No wallowing around. Just because Bakugo and Todoroki are getting special treatment doesn't mean that we aren't going to be proper heroes. We are Class 1A for crying out loud. We're the cream of the crop!
Shouted Monoma, with his fist raised in the air attempting to motivate his rather disheartened classmates. Though his words garnered sighs and groans, as his cheerful and arrogant attitude had grown tiresome. A hand then rested on the teen's shoulder, only for the purple-haired brainwasher to speak up.
Ow! Well then how about you stop punching people? Sound like a good idea?
The nonchalant teen patted the blonde on the chest before helping the perverted midget from the ground, which was met by gratitude and snide comments from said boy. A yin from Monoma's yang was the field for the two heroes, a common occurrence, that one would balance out the other. Despite the clashing personalities, the students did give their all day by day to improve themselves and not be left behind. In front of the gates of UA stood a man with black hair and a gray suit, accompanied by a pregnant green-haired woman. They seemed to frantically ring a bell and shout loudly, which caught the attention of some of the students that were outside the dorms for the time. The commotion garnered the attention of security, who attempted to deny entry and calm them, though their plan was not reaching its desired outcome.
Sir, please step back. Without proper clearance, we cannot let you go through. I don't give a damn about clearance! We know that you people know something about our son!
The armed guard pointed his rifle at the ebony-haired man, who began growing impatient as smoke began escaping through his teeth. The green-haired woman gripped onto her husband's shirt, her eyes becoming wet as she held back tears. Before things could get further out of hand, the gates of the school suddenly opened as the school principal made his entrance. "Mr. and Mrs. Midoriya, please come in." Seeing the admittance into the campus by Nezu caused the guards to lower their weapons and step aside, but not before watching the scanner closely. The two angered parents passed by the gate, and the infection light flashed green, showing that they were currently clean. As they were led through the campus and towards the unoccupied office of the head educator of the institution, the parents refused to mince words or pleasantries, as they required. No, they demanded answers.
Mr. Nezu, we deserve an explanation. Not but a year ago we lost our boy, or... That's what we were told. We buried an empty casket. How? How is this possible? Wasn't the virus supposed to mutate or kill? Everything we've seen shows that it turns people into monsters, but how do you explain our son's condition? How is he alive? Better yet, how is he still human?
Shouted Hisashi as trails of flame began puffing from the edges of his mouth, his righteous anger continuing to build within him. All the while, Inko caressed her bulbous pregnant belly while soft tears streamed down her reddened cheeks.
You people call yourselves heroes, but who do you think you are to keep our son's survival? How dare you keep our little Izuku a secret?
The dams had burst, and even the black-haired man could not contain his sorrow as he began to cry while gripping his seat, his mouth still fuming. The educator remained silent, allowing the parents to vent out their frustrations, but meanwhile, carefully calculating his next words. After the verbal abuse by the rightfully angered man and more quiet sobs from the greenette, the room grew uncomfortably quiet. Letting out a delicate sigh, the white-pelted bear mouse raised his head to address the Midoriya family. Originally, the boy was brought to us several months ago by the Public Safety Commission. But the reason for the deception was for the betterment of our country and the safety of those within it. Allow me to tell you the truth. The conversation seemed to go on for around an hour. Nezu explained the surprise resurrection of Patient Zero, the abilities that he had gained after becoming the host of the virus, and his amnesia. Due to the many unknowns, it was decided that the boy would need to be studied, as he may have been their only hope of eradicating the hellish viral strain. The couple listened carefully, shocked by each and every event that was relayed to them. But when the events of the USJ came to light, the two's eyes widened and their hearts sank, though the last horrific detail shook them to their core. It seems the boy is too far gone. We were sent a security camera recording by the Public Safety Commission. I do warn you, what you're about to see is very graphic. The wall opened up, to reveal a television screen. With the press of a button, CCTV camera footage began to play. In that moment, the appearance of Izuku Midoriya was revealed, his torture and eventual murder of a portly doctor. Hisashi's hand covered his mouth as the vision of his young boy, who was no longer recognizable. He held back the impulse to throw up at the gore he was witnessing, but instinctively he looked towards his wife, seeing her staring with a look of horror on her face. At the end of the long meeting, the Midoriya family embraced, as the matriarch of the family could not contain her anguish, soaking her husband's shirt with her tears. Hisashi lightly ran his fingers through his wife's hair, attempting to console his beloved, but he knew that one question still stood unanswered. Is there any hope that our son can be redeemed? The bear mouse seemed somber when the question reached his ears, and after a second, Nezu shook his head, which pained the man further. At the end of the day, the Midoriyas left UA in a crumbled mess. Their emotional state was so unfortunate that they required a taxi just to return to their home, as neither of the two were in condition to drive. Once they arrived, Hisashi fiddled with his keys as his hand shook violently, impairing his dexterity. After a few tries, the door had been unlocked, but when the lights were flipped on, a nightmarish sight awaited them. Sitting on the sofa, wearing blood-stained clothes, was Patient Zero himself. The boy held a disturbing smile as he saw his parents enter the room, but his look of happiness shifted as his eyes set on his mother's stomach. Hisashi attempted to turn and run, but as soon as he shifted around, his path was blocked by a warp gate. "Leaving so soon, father. Very rude. You've been abroad for so many years. Don't you want to speak to your son?" Venom seemed to drip from the boy's words as he remained seated on the purple couch that rested in the center of the living room, his gaze still firmly locked onto his terrified mother. The two gulped audibly as they slowly walked towards their son, knowing deep in their hearts that they had no escape. "My boy, we know what you've done. We just found out what happened. I'm so—" Before the ebony-haired man could finish his sentence, a black tendril suddenly shot from the green-haired boy and wrapped around his throat. Hisashi grabbed hold of the tendril as he was slowly raised into the air. His legs began flailing below him. Inko, meanwhile, began to cry once more as she stumbled back, barely able to keep herself on her feet. "Enough from you!" "You left us. And once you heard of my passing, you just magically decided to show up? What a kind gesture! And then you decided to fill the void in your life with this. A replacement? Good to know I'm so easily replaceable." Patient Zero's words stabbed into the soul of the expectant mother as she fell to her knees sobbing uncontrollably. Seeing his mother's turmoil caused a strange sensation for the boy. Was it pity? Regret? He wasn't certain. But he could remember that his mother, throughout his life, was the only one to properly care for him. But would that be enough? In a moment, the tendrils loosened and the elder Midoriya crashed downwards, struggling to regain his breath. Outstretching his palm, Izuku stared into his mother's eyes, which were met by his own emerald eyes, the ominous glow currently dulled. The woman, through her tears, reached out and got to her feet, then soon after being embraced by her son. "Thank you for everything, Mom." Inko cried into her son's shoulder as she reciprocated the embrace, clinging to his blood-stained clothing. Though, in that moment of weakness, a sharp sting was felt by the green-haired woman in her abdomen. She felt a strange pain that quickly dissipated as the adrenaline coursing through her body numbed her down. "You both need to leave Japan immediately." His words rang into the couple's ears, as Izuku released the embrace and slowly pushed out of his mother's arms. Shooting a glare at his father, the greenette began walking towards the warp gate entrance. "Protect that child, or I will come myself and find you, dear father." With his back turned towards the adults, Izuku waved his parents off as he passed through the gate and the portal closed behind him. Inkle fell to her knees once more as she began to cry from a combination of relief, fear, and regret, before shouting out at the top of her lungs, "Izuku!" Shortly after, the neighbors were alerted by the screams, and the ambulance was called to take the pregnant woman to the local hospital. Due to the stress, Mrs. Midoriya had fallen unconscious and her husband and emergency personnel worried for the nearly full-term child within her. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. With the services Skillshare provides, you can access many in-depth tutorials on basically anything you want to learn. Each class they have is bound to help you with your creative endeavors. Do you want to learn how to make videos like this one? Do you know how to write scripts or edit audio? Skillshare has you covered, and with our link, you can have a 14-day free trial. So what are you waiting for? Click the link now and get 14 days worth of classes for free. Link in the description below. Back at UA, All Might and his former sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, sat within the teacher's dormitory common area. The television was on as the ongoing situation was being reported on a 24-hour basis. A woman in business dress stood on camera as a large commotion occurred behind her. Here we are reporting live from Hostu City, as former viral sensation turned hero Gentle Criminal, or now just known as Gentle, alongside his sidekick La Brava, are assisting on the evacuation of the city district. The camera shifted towards the view of a mustachioed gray-haired man in a suit that seemed to repel the hordes of infected that continued approaching civilians. Forcing his palm towards the beasts, the air in front of him became more elastic, and the more they struggled, the harder they were pushed back. A short, pigtailed young woman accompanied the man as she began to usher crowds of civilians out of the area.
La Brava, wonderful performance as always. Let us fight back with the might of our love.
The magenta-haired partner smiled brightly as she embraced the leg of her partner before rushing off to continue her activities. But before she could turn, a four-legged infected appeared before her, ready to strike. Then, in a split second, a serrated blade pierced its skull, killing it instantly. When La Brava looked up, she locked eyes with the noseless man with bandages around his arms and a large smile on his face.
Mr. Stain! Thank you!
The man now known as Stain did not look at the girl as he wiped his katana and walked towards the well-dressed hero, who continued to push back dozens of infected that continued their unrelenting charge. Sweat began to run down his cheeks as the white-haired man seemed rather shaken, for he had been at it for over an hour at that point. But once he noticed the blade-wielding man, a small smirk formed on his face.
Glad for you to have joined us here, Stain. Mind giving us a hand? I'd be a hypocrite if I allowed more innocents to die because of these monstrosities.
The two lightly bumped fists as Gentle focused his quirk on the ground as the entire surface became elastic. Taking on the opportunity, both the fancy-dressed man and the former hero killer pounced forward to take out as many of the infected that seemed to span from across the street a few blocks away. Jumping off from building to building, Stain used his katana effectively to decapitate and shoot his daggers at a multitude of biomutants. The man, using his elasticity quirk, seemed to unsheathe a thin blade from within his cane, using it to quickly follow his battle partner in the act. After their joint strike managed to fell many of the infected, the newly arriving creatures began to converge on their position. But before they could continue their strike, a silver blur passed by, taking many of the infected off of their feet. Coming to a screeching halt in front of the two was a man dressed in knightly armor and engines emerging from his arms. The man gestured a thumbs up towards the two, which was met by a nod of respect as the trio continued fighting back against the infected. The speed of Ingenium, the ruthlessness of Stain, and the intelligence and innovation from Gentle caused the hordes to be pushed back onto the cross street that currently had a massive worm-like creature with blades for a head coming out from the ground. The creature, codenamed Hydra by the Public Safety Commission, was one of the most dangerous types of creatures birthed from the Blacklight virus, and the area around its emergent point seemed to propagate the virus.
La Brava, now!
Shouted the gray-haired man as his pink-haired sidekick approached carefully from a distance. Using a megaphone, she began professing her love for the man, and suddenly a pink glow began emanating from the two partners.
Special move!
Lover mode!
Exclaimed the two in unison as the physical capabilities of Gentle began to augment to a massive extent, and the entire field became elastic. Jumping from side to side, the man began to blitz the hordes, his blade tearing through limbs and necks as if they were butter. Not staying behind, Stain used his overwhelming speed and took advantage of the elasticity to enhance his movements significantly. I'm not getting left behind! Recipro! Burst! Announced Ingenium as his engines roared to life, and blue flames fired from his arms and his speed suddenly maxed out, rocketing him through the scene. The trio fought back against the various infected until only the Hydra stood in the center, and after many strikes from both Gentle and Stain's blades, and many blows from the speed hero, the creature began twitching, but was still fighting back. Their energy now rather drained, the trio heaved heavily, as they could see that the Hydra was beginning to regenerate. Crap, thought Gentle, until he looked up to see a smirking familiar face fast approaching. From the skies, a large muscular man decorated in flames was dropping to the city from a helicopter, holding a massive flame that trailed behind him. Ignited Arrow! With a mention of his super move, the flame in his hand shot down towards the Hydra and instantly set it ablaze. Using his fire as a type of repulsor, the number 2 hero landed down at the epicenter of the battle. Don't drop your guard. Bring the infected to the center. We need to incinerate them immediately. The trio nodded as they began collecting the unmoving bodies of the infected and brought them to the center. Alongside the heroes was a woman with fiery hair that worked with Endeavor's agency, who also assisted in the collection. On that day, the heroes managed to eradicate a newly minted spawn zone and avoided the spread further into Hosu City. Stain had left the area before the news could approach and ask any questions, but his eyes had been set on the flame hero as he felt that something sinister lay beneath the strong surface, something he would need to explore later on. After the flames died down and the zone was locked down for security's sake, the man known as Gentle sheathed his blade within his cane and reached out to grab the hand of his partner that stood cheerfully by his side. The two walked off into the distance as the ash from the slain infected was carried by the wind into the dark of the night. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed it. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right here below in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects that our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I would like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.